and a major win for those of us who care about transparency and democracy and open courtrooms. Judge McAfee in the Georgia RICO case against Trump and 18 other co-defendants has ruled that there will be a live stream camera in the courtroom. My name is Dina Sayegh Doll from the MeidasTouch Network. Let's break this down. Now, first of all, that is exactly what you think it is. There's going to be a camera run by the court itself, and they will be live streaming it on YouTube. That means we here at MeidasTouch will be live streaming the Trump Georgia case and all related Trump cases. So that means if indeed they do try them separately, we know that Fani Willis is still trying to get one trial for all 19 defendants. But if it doesn't happen and they get it separated, all of those trials will be live streamed here on MeidasTouch. We will be breaking it down. So if you have not yet subscribe now. You will get updates. You will be in the know as to exactly when these trials are happening. As of now, we know that two of the co-defendants, Chesborough and Sidney Powell, have both asked for a speedy trial, which means that their trial will be October 23rd as of now, which means again that we will be live streaming here on MeidasTouch Network starting then these Trump related RICO trials, and we'll be analyzing them also in real time for you and breaking it all down afterwards. So this is really huge news. And also, as we know, Fani Willis might even be able to get her shot, and we could even see Trump himself at the end of October in this live stream. Regardless, even if it's later, it will still be live streamed. So again, subscribe now. So huge news here, and exactly the right thing. I've been talking in other videos. I just think it's so important that actually all of these be live streamed. The federal courts, as we know, traditionally doesn't have cameras in the courtroom, but there is nothing in the Constitution or anything like that that prevents it. In fact, Chief Justice Roberts, as the head of the Judicial Conference, could just change it and say, hey, the first time of the federal indictment, especially the election interference case, regarding, whether or not Donald Trump overturned or tried to overturn a presidential election, I think that should also be live streamed. But at least this Georgia one will, because really that's the most overlap of the federal DC case. We'll see a lot of the same facts. We'll see a lot of the same witnesses. And we even see a little bit more because they have the actual data breach in the machines there in Georgia. So definitely a very important case to be live streamed. And Georgia law, is very clear. There's a 2018 order where they say, quote, open courtrooms are indispensable element of an effective and respective judicial system. I was a journalist before I became a lawyer, so I'm 1000% agree with that. In order for us to, there are going to be people, if they can't see for themselves, will just always think that any case against Trump is rigged, that all of it is fabricated evidence. And you know what? Some of them might still have that opinion. But if you, with your own eyes, can hear a witness's statement and decide for yourself if that person is credible, that is a huge win for democracy and for our justice system. This is actually what I do. I'm a legal analyst and I follow live, high-profile trials all the time. And I get a ton of feedback from people because I do a lot of posting on TikTok and, other places where I break down the trial. And I get a lot of questions. People ask really specific questions about the trial. They'll ask me about hearsay rules, and they'll ask me about, why certain evidence wasn't allowed in and others was. And it's people care about, at the end of the day, the mechanics of the trial. And it's going to be so important in this Trump trial for people to see for themselves. There's something called foundational evidence, right? And before you introduce a piece of evidence, you have to lay its foundation. Like in a let's say it's like a DNA swab or something. You have to have the chain of custody, right? Like who took the swab, where they took the swab, how the swab was transported for testing and all that kind of stuff. And it's the most dry and boring part of the testimony of a trial, but it lays the foundation that the evidence is real, it's authentic, and it can be relied upon by the jury. And so we're going to see this foundational evidence in order to introduce any evidence, foundational testimony in order to introduce any evidence in this courtroom. And that laying of that groundwork makes it really hard for somebody to refute that this is all made up evidence against Trump, because it's dry and it's boring and it's tedious, but it shows step by step why that later piece of evidence is reliable and accurate. And you get to hear the jury instructions. You get to hear what the jury, how they get to, they're told like how they can assess what is reasonable doubt, how they can assess the credibility of a witness, what kind of weight do they give expert testimony, all that really nitty gritty stuff. And I think it helps make people understand why a jury decides certain things. Depp v. Heard was one of those huge cases that I followed. And there was a lot of comments about the fact that it went viral. So many people talked about it on social media. And I never see that as a bad thing, even if it, gets talked about and people think that maybe they're making light of it. I don't know if they were. A lot of people talked about domestic violence in my comments as well. But the fact of the matter is people were interested and they saw for themselves and they made their own decision of whether or not a witness is credible. And that I think is so important here, is to decide whether or not those witnesses are credible. And I actually have gotten even some comments from MeidasTouch viewers when I talked about this earlier about, like, what about the jury? How do we protect the jury? And the cameras do not show the jury. That's something that is not done in any viewing, any live stream viewing of any trial. The jury is never shown. So that's how they can be protected. And not only that, but in a high profile case, they often seal the names of the jurors for quite a bit of time. Like again, in that Depp case, they sealed it for 1 year because that was such a high profile case. Maybe they'll do it even longer for Trump in order to protect them. They might even sequester the jury here. So that way they are removed from friends and family and social media and neighbors. That could very well happen in a case like this. They'll certainly be sequestered during deliberations, but I could see them being sequestered throughout the whole period. And so that's how they protect the jury, is the jury is just not shown. And then somebody else kind of asked, what about the witnesses? Like, how is that going to affect the witnesses? Are they going to feel intimidated? And then the fact of the matter is the names of the witnesses are out there or will be out there regardless if the camera is there or not, right? Because it is all public. So even if a camera's not physically showing it, people, could find out the names of the witnesses and still try to intimidate them. So I don't know if that makes much of a difference. And in this case, in particular, this election interference case, there is going to be a lot of overlap in the evidence that we have seen with the January 6th committee, or, there's a lot of known witnesses here. So I don't know if that even actually makes that big of a difference necessarily. Because again, a lot of this testimony and evidence we kind of have seen before, if that makes sense. But even still, I don't think not having a camera in there protects them, because they can still be harassed, unfortunately, just by having their name out there, because again, we have public system. So definitely a huge win here for transparency. And really, we hopefully, again, we will have Chief Justice Roberts possibly make a different decision, possibly being willing to open up DC. But if nothing else, Georgia really standing by this fact that he is a typical criminal defendant. In Georgia, right there in Fulton County, was also the only one who had a mugshot of him. So again, treated like everybody else. He got the mugshot. He's having the cameras. They have high profile cases all the time in Georgia, and they have cameras in the courtroom. And so this is just an extension of that. And I think that people being able to see that kind of level of rules, to be quite frank, how many rules there are in the criminal court, I think will give quite a bit of people satisfaction and the seriousness of how this case is being handled. And the other thing too, though, that's interesting is we saw, how Trump's lawyers acted in the DC case there against Judge Chutkan and was so rude and abrasive to her. And this Georgia case is going to be really interesting because they're going to have to decide how do they want to play in front of a jury, and two, how do they want to play in front of the cameras? Because let's be frank here, the one party who really is probably most affected by the cameras is Trump himself, because he has an obsession about his image. And how is he willing to appear on that defense table? Is he going to be willing to be quiet? Is he going to be willing to appear meek? Is his lawyers going to be brash and rude and abrasive because that plays well with what they think are his constituents, even if it turns off the jury? Or are they going to be respectful to witnesses and sure, tough, but respectful in order to help sway the jury? I think those can be two very, very different things. So they're going to have to make a choice. I don't think they're going to be able to be both their typical rude and abrasive selves and still also win over the jury. So what is Trump and his lawyers, how much are they willing to risk in the criminal trial in order to appeal to the public? Two different goals there, and they do not mesh well. The jury is really sacrificing, quite frankly, a lot of their time and energy, especially if they're sequestered. Even if they're not sequestered, we're talking about weeks of giving up your life. And if you have a lawyer who's acting really obnoxious and objecting too many times or talking over a judge or talking over a witness, that's going to really frustrate the jury because they have to sit there and be respectful and listen to everything. And if you're not playing by those same rules and you're wasting their time, that's not going to play well. And so Trump's lawyers would be much better off being smart and respectful. But so far, they haven't shown that they can do that. I don't even know if Trump can do it. But either way, again, subscribe to MeidasTouch for this live streaming of this major RICO case against Trump and all parties in Georgia. And subscribe now, and you'll be able to get updates about exactly all of the hearings, because it's not just the trial, it's any kind of related hearings, all live streamed. So, we will make sure you know what's being live streamed and when. My name is Dina Sayegh Doll. So glad that we get to break this down for you here at MeidasTouch Network.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram at MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.